Okay, let me now continue with my third narration of developmental psychology, talking a little bit about adolescence, um, but in particular, in a little bit, we'll talk about not only cognitive development, but moral development. So, at the cognitive aspect of things, adolescence gets us into formal operational thought, right? And so adolescents are famous for, um, sort of being very much enthralled with their newfound abstract thinking tools. Okay, so that's that's basically what's going on in adolescence in one respect. Adolescents are also increasingly able to reason logically and to develop a sophisticated level of moral reasoning, moral judgments. Okay, and so we'll talk about developing moral reasoning, in particular, Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Okay, who talked about there being a universal sequence through which moral reasoning develops. So this is Kohlberg's three of his three major levels of moral thinking, where at the he talks about pre-conventional morality, which is usually found in children before age 9. Okay, conventional morality, which emerges in early adolescence, and in fact, in many for some adults, may actually stop there and not go beyond conventional morality. And then in adolescence, there is also the capability of thinking in what Kohlberg called post-conventional morality terms, and that tends to characterize, as we say, adolescence and beyond, adult morality. But adults may find themselves, uh, you know, at any, at some, at least the advanced stage of conventional morality, or at a post-conventional stage. So pre-conventional morality involves basically the focus, the fulcrum against which moral judgments are weighed is basically that of self-interest. Okay, the child obeys rules to avoid punishment or to gain concrete rewards. Okay, so as we'll see when we get to the Heinz dilemma, uh, if you save your dying wife, you'll be a hero. Okay, you should do that because you're going to get this reward for it. The conventional morality, the focus is on upholding laws and rules as a way of gaining social approval, and also possibly to maintain social order. If you steal the drug for her, everyone will think you're a criminal. Okay, so there'll be social disapproval of you. Again, we'll get to this example, but remember these quotes in general. We'll revisit them. At the post-conventional morality stage, actions reflect belief in basic rights and self-defined ethical principles, okay, such as people have a right to live, and that's inalienable and trumps other rights. So actually, Kohlberg talked about his three levels dividing into 6 different stages, 2 stages for each level. So, you know, at stage 1, the most primitive level of moral reasoning is the punishment obedience orientation. Morality is what you can get away with, right? A little stage 2, still in the pre-conventional level, instrumental exchange orientation. The child or individual obeys rules in order to obtain rewards or favors. Okay, so it's morality is what's instrumental in getting you good stuff. Okay, uh, when we get into the conventional morality, the good child orientation, you obey rules, and the good stuff that you do it for is approval, social approval, parental approval, and so on. And then stage 4 is the law and order orientation. You obey laws because they maintain the social order, and it's important to do that. So that's how morality is defined. Get to post-conventional, the social contract orientation. Moral reasoning reflects belief in democratically established laws. Okay, and then finally at stage 6, there's a universal ethics orientation. That moral reasoning, morality reflects individual conscience. Let's look at the Heinz dilemma just to put some meat on these bones of a theory. So this is Kohlberg. There are several examples that are used to study level of moral development, and one is the Heinz example. So people are basically told a story. Okay, the story is there's this guy Heinz. Okay, his wife has a rare disease. Okay, that basically she's likely to die from unless she gets a certain medication, a certain treatment. Okay, as it turns out, there is a pharmacist slash physician. Okay, who has developed the cure for this disease, the medicine that's needed to cure this disease, and it's a rare disease. Okay, but the inventor, the druggist, we'll call him, has basically said, oh, I'm not going to give this to you. Okay, you need to pay me. Okay, I need to get paid for this drug that I invented. Heinz cannot afford to do so. Okay, and he begs and pleads, but the person refuses to give him it to him or to lower his price or whatever. So Heinz goes and breaks into the druggist's lab, office, whatever. Okay, and steals the drug. Okay, and so that's the story. And the question that is then posed to the subject is, uh, was Heinz right or wrong to have stolen this drug for his wife, who was dying otherwise? Okay, and why? Why was he right or wrong? And the key is, not whether they say it's right or wrong, but the reasons they give. Okay, so we can look at the various levels of moral reasoning on the basis of the kinds of answers that people give in terms of why do you say it's right, why do you say it's wrong. So someone who's at the pre-conventional morality level, okay, where the whole basis is to avoid punishment, someone who said no, it was right for him to do so might say something like, why? Because if you let your wife die, you will get in trouble. So a small child might give that answer. A person who, typically a child who says no, Heinz was wrong, might say something like, you shouldn't steal the drug because you'll get caught and sent to jail if you do it. So the whole basis for whether Heinz is right or wrong in both cases is avoiding the punishment. Okay, that's the definition of what's right or wrong. The second stage, again, normally a child, okay, the person says, that he was right to do it. If you steal the drug, your wife will live. Okay, you're going to get a concrete reward for that, right? Okay. Person who said no, it was wrong. He may not get much of a jail term if he steals the drug, but his wife will probably die before he gets out. Okay. So basically, it's saying, he's going to he shouldn't do it because he's not going to get, if he does do it, okay, he won't get the rewards of his wife being alive. Okay, conventional morality, to gain social approval, avoid disapproval. Well, if you steal the drug, your wife will live and you'll be a hero. You're going to get this approval from the social approval for this. Okay. Um, well, it isn't just the druggist who will think you're a criminal. Everyone else will too. So people are going to look at you as if you're, again, morality being defined in terms of, in this case, the massive social disapproval that may come from him uh, stealing it and getting caught. The fourth level, does duty to society avoids dishonor or guilt? Well, he was right to do so, to steal it, because if you have any sense of honor, you won't let your wife die because you're afraid to do the only thing that will save her. So it's your duty to yourself, it's your duty to society, it's the duty to avoid the dishonor that might be associated with that. Okay, not doing your duty to society. Well, he shouldn't have done it because you'll always feel guilty for your dishonesty and law breaking. Again, the opposite there. Post-conventional morality, morality of abstract principles, agreed upon rights. He was right to steal it. His obligation to save his wife's life must take precedence. The value of human life is logically prior to the value of property. Okay, so again, agreed upon, human rights. Okay, and laws and rules. He was wrong because it's so hard for people to live together unless there are some laws governing their actions. And one of the laws is that one doesn't steal. Okay, so that defines morality for that person. And then we get to stage 6. He was right to do this because if you don't steal the drug, you would have lived up to the outside rule of the law, which you want to do at stage 5, but you wouldn't have lived up to your own standards or conscience. Or he was wrong to do it because if you steal the drug, you won't be blamed by other people, but you'll condemn yourself because you won't have lived up to your own conscience and standards of honesty. Okay, so you can see the progression here of stages of morality in terms of how people define and explain their moral judgments. Okay, so that's Kohlberg's stages of moral development. The children are here. Once we start getting into adolescence, we see it's kind of a stage theory. We can see the ability, and you need kind of formal operational thought to some extent to get here. Okay, although concrete works as well, but you have to be able to think in some sort of logical way to get to conventional morality, and so adolescents are capable here. And maybe a little later in adolescence you move on here because this requires, post-conventional morality requires abstract kinds of principles and things like that. Okay, but some people, across the adults in our society basically primarily can be divided into 3, 4, 5, and 6 in terms of where they are in terms of their moral development, if you will. The Kohlberg stages have some legal implications, right? And good to talk maybe for a moment about this, given the fact that we're at John Jay College. So definitions of right and wrong, what excuses an act, these vary across those stages we just talked about, and therefore citizens. Okay, so the reasons that people obey laws differ across the stages and therefore across citizens. Okay, if people are at level 1, okay, the pre-conventional morality, the motives for obeying the law are to avoid punishment and typically involve the awe of authority. Okay, so if you're rigid authoritarian, in awe of authority and obeying authority, then the motives for breaking the law versus obeying the law uh, are going to be, those are going to be the motives, avoiding the punishment. If you're at level 2, so your preoccupation might be maintaining social order. That's why people obey laws, okay? And if you're at level 3, people follow laws to the extent that the laws coincide with the principles they have derived themselves, okay? So in terms of making laws and understanding the obedience versus disobedience toward laws, it's useful to consider Kohlberg's stages of moral development. Something that many of you who are either criminal justice or forensic psychology majors might encounter later when you take various kinds of courses in psychology and law, and similar kinds of courses. Okay, adolescent social development. Okay. Well, adolescent struggle involves one of Erickson's stages, which we're going to see in the next slide, which I believe might be the last one. One of the things that adolescents grapple with is this identity. Okay, they have identity crises. Okay, developing a firm identity, kind of knowing who you are, knowing your situation in the world and where you are and where you want to go. Okay, versus having role confusion. It's a conflict. It's a dilemma that adolescents struggle with, and that struggle may continue, of course, into adulthood for many of us. So social identity involves the we aspect of self-concept that comes from group memberships. So as adolescents become increasingly concerned with peers and peer pressure in groups, okay, the self-concept tends to expand to incorporate social groups, okay, becomes part of the self-concept, okay. So social identity is emerging in adolescence. This is something that you should read about in the module on adolescence, okay. And you need this healthy identity formation, okay, as a basis, as the bedrock, as the foundation for a capacity to build close relationships. We need to identify who we are in a healthy kind of way, okay, if we're going to be able to interact in ways that allow us to build close relationships and pick among the groups and the people out there those who for whom there is the sufficient match with our identity to build those relationships. So social development in identity development is a huge thing, okay, in the adolescent world. Many of you are very close to adolescence, so you remember it well, but I can assure you you don't forget it as you get older. So I too remember, the peer pressure, the identity development, and the confusion associated with in working through that during adolescence. Okay, this next table comes from, as you can see here, the textbook. I think you can find it in module 16 of the text that we're currently with. So we talked about in this Erickson stage of psychosocial development. We've talked about attachment and how it's so important to get through this first stage. Failure to do so leads to a mistrustful, anxious, ambivalent about social relationships, kind of stuck there. Getting out of toddlerhood having a sense of autonomy, and and a sense that I can do kind of thing, um, or are we going to have doubt and shame about what we do, and so on. And so you should read about these various stages, which I won't, elaborate on right now. But the two that we've kind of um, focused on, of course, is the trust versus mistrust stage, and then as we move into the adolescent stage, the identity versus role confusion. But I will make the connection that when we're talking about intimacy versus isolation, this sort of stage 5, okay, um, you know, um, there's a lot of connection here between, so was there a secure attachment that developed, okay, that can allow us to get to form close relationships, to feel a sense of intimacy, versus a feeling socially isolated, and so on and so forth. You can see that these are connected and fluid stages of development through life that build upon one another, and may limit or expand the ability to move in the right direction in terms of dealing with these issues. Okay, um, so so that's an important way of looking at Erickson's stage of psychosocial development, and we could plug in some of the stuff we've talked about through this this introductory psychology section on development. Okay, so that, I believe, is the end of our show, and so I will sign off. So long.